Jake Morrison knelt beside the wreckage and wiped sweat from his face with a dirty hand. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction like an ocean of molten glass that reflected the twin suns of Ashara Prime back into his eyes. His combat medic gear felt heavy on his shoulders, but he ignored the discomfort because somewhere in this hellscape there might be survivors. The crashed ship was unlike anything he had seen before. Its hull shimmered with colors that seemed to shift when he looked away, and strange symbols pulsed weakly across its surface like a dying heartbeat. Captain Hayes stood behind him with crossed arms and a frown that said he wanted to leave already. "This is Sylvari Tech," Hayes said, and spat into the sand. "We should call it in and move on." Jake shook his head and adjusted his medical scanner. The readings were strange, but definitely showed life signs inside at least 3 or 4. He had taken an oath to help anyone who needed it, and that included aliens, even if those aliens had killed his sister 3 years ago during a border raid. "I am going in." Jake said Hayes cursed, but did not stop him. The other 2 soldiers in their unit, Danny and Chris, followed Jake toward the breach in the hull. Their weapons were raised, and their fingers rested near the triggers. Jake understood their fear. The Sylvari Empire had been at war with humanity for almost a decade now, and trust was a luxury nobody could afford. Inside the ship, the air smelled wrong, like flowers mixed with metal and something else Jake could not name. His boots crunched on scattered crystal shards that covered the floor. Lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows that moved in ways shadows should not move. They found the first body in a corridor. A Sylvari warrior with pale skin and pointed ears lay dead with a blade still clutched in his hand. His silver blood pooled beneath him and reflected the dying lights above. "He was killed by his own people," Chris whispered and pointed at the wound. It was a blade strike, not weapons fire. Jake felt cold despite the heat. Why would they turn on each other? They moved deeper into the ship and found more bodies, all Sylvari, all killed by blades or close combat weapons. The walls were scorched in places, suggesting there had been a desperate fight. Danny checked each room they passed but found nothing except empty chambers and broken equipment. The throne room was at the heart of the ship. Jake knew it was important the moment he saw the massive doors carved with images of dragons and stars. One door hung off its hinges, and beyond it lay darkness. Jake activated his helmet light and stepped through. The throne room was massive, far larger than the ship should have been able to contain. Sylvari technology broke the rules of physics in ways human engineers still struggled to understand. At the center of the room, on a throne made of what looked like living crystal, sat a woman. She was beautiful in an alien way. Her skin glowed faintly like moonlight, and her silver hair fell in waves past her shoulders. She wore armor that seemed to be made of scales, and her eyes, though closed, were framed by elegant features that made Jake think of ancient elves from old Earth stories. But she was injured badly. Blood. The color of liquid mercury stained her armor, and her breathing was shallow. Behind the throne, something moved. Jake barely had time to shout a warning before the dragon attacked. It was massive, even lying down. Its scales were transparent like diamonds, and its eyes burned with violet fire. The creature lunged forward with surprising speed. For something so wounded, its jaws opened, and Jake saw rows of crystal teeth that could tear through steel. He dove sideways as a blast of fire erupted from the dragon's mouth. Danny was not fast enough. The flames hit him, and he screamed once before turning into a statue of glass that shattered when it hit the floor. Chris opened fire, but the bullets bounced off the dragon's scales. The creature roared, and the sound was like breaking glass, amplified 1,000 times. Jake felt blood trickle from his ears as the sonic attack overwhelmed his helmet protection. "Stop!" Jake shouted and threw down his weapon. He held up his empty hands and walked slowly toward the dragon. "Your rider is hurt. Let me help her." The dragon paused. Its eyes fixed on Jake with an intelligence that was terrifyingly human. It tilted its head as if considering his words. Then it looked back at the woman on the throne and made a sound that was almost like a whimper. Jake understood. The dragon was dying too. Its scales were cracked in places and silver blood leaked from dozens of wounds. It had used its last strength to defend its rider. But now it had nothing left. "I am a medic," Jake said softly. He pointed at his medical kit. "I can help." "Please." The dragon watched him for a long moment. Then slowly it lowered its head and moved aside. Jake released a breath he had not known he was holding and approached the throne. The woman was even more beautiful up close, but Jake pushed those thoughts aside and focused on his training. He pulled out his scanner and ran it over her body. The readings were difficult to interpret because Sylvari biology was different from human, but he could see enough to know she was in critical condition. "Poison," Jake muttered. He saw the mark on her neck, a small puncture wound that glowed faintly green. She had been injected with something, and it was shutting down her organs one by one. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Chris backing toward the door. "We need to leave now," Chris said. His eyes were wide with fear. "This is too much, Jake." "That thing killed Danny." Jake looked at the dragon, then at the woman. She was dying, and if she died, the dragon would die too. He could see it in the creature's eyes. The bond between them was that strong. "Go," Jake said. "I am staying." Chris stared at him like he had gone insane. "Captain Hayes is going to have you shot for treason." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But I took an oath." Chris cursed and ran. Jake heard him shouting into his radio, calling for extraction, telling Hayes that Jake had lost his mind. Maybe that was true. Maybe carrying a dying alien queen through 90 miles of burning desert was insane, but Jake had lost too much to war already. His sister Amy had died hating the Sylvari, and that hate had poisoned her last years. If he could save one life, maybe just one, it might mean something. He turned back to the dragon. "I need to treat you first," he said. "If you die, she dies." The dragon seemed to understand. It lowered itself to the floor and exposed its wounded side. Jake had never treated an alien dragon before, but wounds were wounds. He cleaned and sealed the worst injuries using foam bandages and synthetic skin. The dragon bore the pain in silence, though its breathing was labored. When he finished, Jake moved to the woman. He injected her with broad-spectrum antitoxins and hoped they would work on Sylvari biology. Then he noticed something. Her left arm had markings that glowed faintly under his scanner. Coordinates. "She was going somewhere," Jake whispered. He checked the ship's navigation logs, but they were encrypted. However, the coordinates on her arm were clear. They pointed to a location 90 miles northeast, through the worst part of the desert. The ship groaned, and Jake felt heat rising through the floor. The core was going critical. He had maybe 5 minutes before the whole thing exploded. He looked at the dragon. "Can you fly?" The creature tried to stand, but collapsed. Its wings were shattered. Jake cursed and grabbed the woman. She was lighter than he expected. Her armor seemed to reduce her weight. Somehow. He slung her over his shoulders in a fireman's carry and started running. The dragon crawled after them. Its claws scraped against the metal floor, leaving trails of silver blood. Jake wanted to tell it to stay to save its strength, but he knew it would not listen. They burst out of the ship just as alarms started blaring. Hayes and the others were already gone. Their transport had lifted off and was heading back to base. Jake was alone in the desert with a dying queen and her dragon. The ship exploded behind them. A pillar of blue fire shot into the sky, and the shock wave knocked Jake to his knees. He held on to the woman and watched as burning debris rained down around them. When the smoke cleared, he stood and looked northeast, 90 miles through a desert that killed people in hours with temperatures that could melt steel. Jake checked his water supply. 2 canteens, not nearly enough. He looked down at the woman in his arms, then back at the dragon that was struggling to follow. "This is insane," he said to nobody, but he started walking anyway, one step then another. The twin suns beat down on him, and the glass beneath his feet reflected heat back up until he felt like he was being cooked alive. The woman in his arms was unconscious, her silver blood staining his uniform, and behind them the dragon left a trail of crystal drops that glittered in the harsh light. Jake Morrison had carried wounded soldiers before, but never an alien queen, and never through hell itself. Yet something in him refused to quit. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the memory of his sister telling him that hate was a poison that killed slowly. He did not know what waited at the coordinates, or why this woman had been trying to reach them. He did not know if she was good or evil, if she deserved saving or not. All he knew was that she was hurt, and he was a medic, and that had to be enough. The desert stretched ahead endlessly. Jake adjusted his grip on the woman and kept walking. The dragon followed, leaving its trail of silver blood, and somewhere far above military satellites tracked their movement and marked Jake Morrison as a traitor to humanity, but that was a problem for later. Right now, there was only the next step, and the one after that, and the faint hope that somewhere 90 miles away there might be answers. The first day was the worst. Jake had thought he understood heat from his training, but the glass desert of Ashara Prime was different. The ground beneath his feet was not sand, but millions of years of compressed silicon that reflected sunlight like a mirror. By noon, the temperature reached levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. His suit cooled him, but barely, and the woman in his arms felt like she was burning up with fever. He had fashioned a stretcher from pieces of the wrecked ship using metal poles and a section of fabric that did not burn. The woman lay on it now, and Jake pulled it behind him like an ancient traveler. The dragon Vexarion, he had learned its name from markings on the ship's hull, crawled alongside them. Its breathing was rough, and each exhale created small clouds of crystalline dust. Jake rationed his water carefully. One sip every hour, no more. The woman needed water too, but when he tried to give her some, it ran down her chin. She was too far gone to swallow. On his scanner, her vital signs were dropping. Her silver blood had stopped flowing, which Jake took as a bad sign. When the twin suns finally set, the temperature dropped so fast that Jake could see his breath. The desert that had tried to cook him alive now tried to freeze him. His suit adjusted, but the woman had no such protection. Jake made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed. He climbed onto the stretcher beside her and wrapped his body around hers, sharing his warmth. The dragon watched them with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. Then it crawled closer and curled its massive body around both of them. Its scales were cold at first, but slowly began to radiate heat. Jake realized the creature was using the last of its energy to keep them warm. "Thank you," Jake whispered. The dragon made a sound like wind chimes. Somewhere around midnight, the woman stirred. Jake felt her move against him, and he pulled back to look at her face. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises that swirled with colors he had no names for. She looked at him without recognition at first, then her gaze sharpened. Who Jake started to say, but she raised a trembling hand to his lips. "Shh," she whispered. Her voice was musical like bells. "The enemy listens always." Jake nodded slowly. He helped her sit up and offered water. This time she drank, though her hands shook so badly he had to hold the canteen for her. When she finished, she looked around and saw Vexarion. Her expression crumbled. "He is dying," she said. "I know," Jake replied. "I did what I could," but she shook her head. "You saved him, you saved us both." Her accent was thick, but her English was clear. She must have studied human languages. Why, Jake was not sure how to answer. "Because you needed help." She studied his face as if searching for lies. "Among my people, a life debt is sacred. You have bound yourself to me, human. I am Jake Morrison." She nodded once, Lyriena of House Silverus, Queen of the Seven Moons. Her title sounded grand, but here in the freezing desert wearing torn armor and covered in blood, she just looked tired. "Your people tried to kill you," Jake said. "It was not a question." My brother Lyraena replied, "Prince Theron, he believes peace is weakness." She closed her eyes and Jake saw tears streak down her cheeks that glowed faintly like liquid light. "I was traveling to meet your diplomats in secret to end this war. But Theron discovered my plan. He sent assassins disguised as my own guards." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. If both sides had extremists who wanted the war to continue, then his rescue of Lyraena would not bring peace. It might make things worse. "The coordinates on your arm," Jake said softly. "Where do they lead?" Lyraena looked down at her glowing tattoos. To answers, she said, "To proof that this war is built on lies. The precursors left something beneath this desert. Something both our peoples need to see." Before Jake could ask more, she collapsed again. Her brief moment of consciousness had exhausted her. Jake laid her back on the stretcher and checked her vital signs. They were worse. The poison was winning. He looked at Vexarian. The dragon was watching him with an expression Jake could only describe as pleading, "I will get her there." Jake promised, "I do not care how far it is." The dragon closed its eyes. Jake did not sleep that night. He sat between Lyraena and Vexarian and watched the stars, strange constellations that were not the ones from Earth. He thought about his sister Amy, about how she had died angry and afraid. He thought about the war and all the lives it had consumed, and he thought about the woman beside him who had been willing to risk everything for peace. When dawn came, Jake stood and began pulling the stretcher again. His legs ached and his water was half gone. By his calculations, he had covered maybe 15 miles. That left 75 more. The second day brought new horrors. Around mid-morning, Jake heard engines. He looked up and saw drones circling high above. They were human military models painted with his unit's markings. His own people were hunting him. He pulled Lyraena into the shadow of a rock formation and waited. The drones passed overhead, their sensors sweeping the desert. Jake held his breath. When they were gone, he started moving again, but now he stayed near cover and moved more slowly. That afternoon, Vexarian stopped moving. Jake turned and saw the dragon had collapsed. Its chest rose and fell weakly. The trail of silver blood it left had grown wider. Jake ran back and knelt beside the great beast. He pulled out his medical supplies, but he had so little left, a few bandages, some medicine that probably would not work on dragon biology. "Please," Jake whispered, "you have to keep going. She needs you." Vexarian's eyes opened. They were cloudy now, losing their violet fire. The dragon looked at Jake, then at Lyraena. It made a sound that might have been a sigh. Then slowly, painfully, it began to crawl forward again. Jake wanted to cry, but he had no water to spare for tears. The third day was when everything went wrong. Jake was down to his last half-canteen of water. Lyraena's fever had spiked so high that her skin burned to the touch. Vexarian could barely move and left smears of silver blood across the glass with each dragging step. But they were close. The coordinates said only 20 miles remained. Then Jake saw the dust cloud on the horizon. He stopped and pulled out his scope. A convoy of vehicles was approaching fast. He recognized the lead truck. It belonged to Commander Victoria Cross, a hard-line officer who believed the only good alien was a dead one. Jake looked around desperately. The desert offered no cover here, just endless flat glass. He could not outrun vehicles. He could not fight a dozen soldiers alone. He looked down at Lyraena, then at Vexarian. "We are out of options," he said. Lyraena stirred. Her eyes opened, and she saw the approaching convoy. She struggled to sit up. "Jake." "Run," she whispered. "Leave me. Take Vexarian, and no." Jake said flatly, "We finish this together." The convoy stopped 50 yards away. Soldiers poured out, taking positions behind their vehicles. Commander Cross stepped forward. She was tall, with gray hair and cold eyes. She carried a rifle like she knew how to use it. "Morrison," she called out, "step away from the alien." Jake stood between Cross and Lyraina. "I cannot do that, Mom." Cross sighed like she was disappointed. "You were a good soldier, Jake, but you have committed treason. The penalty is death. Not just for me," Jake said. "You will kill her too. An unarmed, injured prisoner of war. She is not a prisoner." Cross replied, "She is the enemy, and you are a traitor." The soldiers raised their weapons. Jake knew he should be afraid, but he just felt tired. He had carried Lyraina for 3 days through hell. He was not going to let her die now. Before anyone could fire, Vexarian moved. The dragon had seemed near death, but now it raised its head and released a pulse of energy. Jake felt it wash over him like a wave. It did not hurt. It just made him feel dizzy. For a moment, he saw images that were not his own. A crystal palace, a woman with a crown dying in a grand bed, a child bonding with a dragon hatchling, plans for peace betrayal. The soldiers saw it too. Jake watched their faces change as they experienced Lyraina's memories. They saw the truth of her mission. They saw Theron's betrayal. They saw that she had been trying to save both their peoples. Commander Cross staggered. Her rifle lowered slightly, but then her expression hardened. "I don't care," she said. "Orders are orders." She raised her rifle and fired. Jake threw himself in front of Lyraina, but before the bullets could hit the ground beneath them, cracked. The glass desert was unstable here. Jake realized too late. Honeycomb with caves below. The ground gave way, and Jake grabbed Lyraina as they fell. Together, they tumbled into darkness, leaving the soldiers shouting above. Jake hit water, and the shock of cold after days of burning heat made him gasp. He still had his arms wrapped around Lyraina, and he kicked hard, fighting toward what he hoped was the surface. They broke through together, coughing and sputtering. Jake dragged them both toward the nearest shore, which turned out to be a smooth platform made of some material that glowed faintly blue. He laid Lyraina down gently and checked her breathing. She was alive, but barely. Her silver blood mixed with the water and created swirling patterns of light. Jake looked around, trying to understand where they were. They had fallen into a cavern, but not a natural one. The walls were carved with the same symbols he had seen on Lyraina's ship. Massive pillars stretched up into darkness, supporting a ceiling so high Jake could not see it. The whole place hummed with a sound just below hearing that made his teeth ache. A light appeared in the distance, bobbing toward them. Jake tensed and reached for his sidearm, but the voice that called out was human and female. "Do not shoot unless you want to wake up things that should stay sleeping." A woman emerged from the shadows. She was maybe 40, with dark hair tied back and wearing clothes that looked like they had not been washed in weeks. She carried a glowing crystal that lit her path. Behind her came another figure, shorter and wrapped in a cloak. Jake kept his weapon raised. "Who are you, Dr. Sophie Grant?" She replied and gestured to her companion. "This is Nix. We are researchers." Well, we were researchers. Now I guess we are squatters. She stopped when she saw Lyraina lying on the platform by the precursors. "Is that a Silvari? She is injured." Jake said, "Can you help her?" Sophie knelt beside Lyraina and pulled out a scanner similar to Jake's but more advanced. She ran it over the unconscious queen and whistled softly. "Poison Theron, Mark 7. Unless I miss my guess, nasty stuff designed specifically to kill Silvari royalty." She looked up at Jake. "You must really love her to drag her this far." Jake felt his face heat. "I do not, I just save it," Sophie interrupted. She pulled an injector from her bag. "This is the antidote. Expensive as hell, and technically illegal for humans to possess, but lucky for you, I do not care much about laws anymore." She pressed the injector against Lyraina's neck. There was a hiss, and the queen's body convulsed once, then went still. "Is she?" Jake started, but Sophie held up a hand. "Give it a minute. The antidote has to bind with the poison before it can neutralize it. Either works, or it does not. They waited. Jake counted his heartbeats and tried not to think about what he would do if Lyrena died after everything. Then her eyes opened. She gasped and sat up so fast she nearly knocked Sophie over, where her voice was rough. "Where is Vexarian above us?" Jake said. "I think he is alive." Lyrena's relief was visible. She turned to Sophie and Nyx, and her expression became guarded. "Who are you, friends?" Sophie said. I hope she stood and offered her hand to Lyrena. "I am Dr. Sophie Grant. I have been studying these ruins for 8 months. Your Majesty Lyrena took her hand and let Sophie help her stand. How do you know my title?" Nyx stepped forward and lowered their hood, revealing delicate Sylvari features. "The same way I know that you carry your mother's blood key in your genetic code. Your Majesty, I have been waiting for you." Lyrena stared. "Nyx, you are one of the archivists." "I was," Nyx replied. "Before your brother declared our order traitors and had most of us executed, I escaped with what knowledge I could and contacted Dr. Grant. We have been working together to uncover the truth." "What truth?" Jake asked. Sophie grinned. "The truth that is going to end your war. Follow me." She led them deeper into the ruins. The tunnels were vast and impossibly old. The walls showed scenes of creatures that looked part human, part Sylvari, and part something else. They were tall and graceful, with features that combined the best of both species. "The precursors," Sophie said as they walked. "They created your species. Did you know that?" Jake shook his head. "That is impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossils, genetic records. You have what they wanted you to find," Sophie replied. "The precursors were masters of genetic engineering. They took primitive species and uplifted them, gave them intelligence, language, culture, but they did not do it randomly. They had a plan." "What plan?" Lyrena asked. Her voice was stronger now that the poison was leaving her system. Sophie stopped before a massive door covered in intricate carvings. To create 2 halves of a whole, humans and Sylvari were designed to be complementary species. You have different strengths, different ways of thinking. The precursors believed that when you finally met, you would unite and become something greater. "Instead, we went to war," Jake said bitterly, "because you were not ready." Sophie agreed. The precursors left behind technology scattered across dozens of worlds. Technology so advanced, it would give whoever controlled it the power to dominate the galaxy. Both your governments found pieces of it and realized that the other side had pieces too. The war is not about territory or resources. It is about collecting precursor tech. Nyx stepped forward. And the worst part is that the technology will not work for either species alone. It requires both human and Sylvari cooperation to activate. The governments know this, but they would rather fight forever than share power. Jake felt sick. So all the deaths. My sister. Everyone who died in this war was for nothing. Sophie finished. I am sorry. Lyrena touched Jake's arm gently. I lost my mother to this war, she said softly. We have both lost too much. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sophie cleared her throat. The door behind me leads to the main chamber. It contains a message from the precursors intended for when both species were ready to hear it. Your Majesty, only you can open it. Your bloodline carries the key. How do you know this? Jake asked. Because I tried, Nyx said, and showed them their hands, which were scarred and burned. The security system does not appreciate unauthorized access. Lyrena approached the door. She placed her palm against it, and the symbols lit up. One by one, they began to glow brighter until the entire door shone like a star. Then it opened silently, revealing a chamber beyond. Inside was a holographic projector, still functional after thousands of years. When they entered, it activated, showing the image of a precursor. The being was beautiful, with features that reminded Jake of both Lyrena and himself. Children of our design, the hologram said in a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds. If you are seeing this, then you have begun to discover the truth. We created you to be better than we were. We fell to civil war because we could not accept our differences. We destroyed ourselves fighting over which faction should lead. The hologram showed images of a war that shattered planets. We created you as two halves, the precursor continued. Humans with their adaptability and endurance, their ability to thrive in any condition. Sylvari with their psychic gifts, their long lives and deep connection to the living universe. Apart, you are strong. Together, you are unstoppable. The message continued explaining that the precursors had left technology throughout the galaxy designed to activate only when humans and Sylvari worked together in genuine cooperation. It was a test and a gift. If the two species could overcome their differences, they would inherit everything. If they destroyed each other like the precursors had, then the technology would remain forever sealed. When the message ended, the four of them stood in stunned silence. Then the chamber shook. "What was that?" Jake asked. "Explosions," Sophie said. "Someone is blasting their way in." They ran back toward the entrance. Jake helped Lyraina, who was still weak from the poison. When they reached the underground lake, they saw lights above military lights from both human and Sylvari forces. "They found us," Nick said. "They are coming." Jake looked at Lyraina, then at Sophie. "We need to access the precursor technology. Can we do it?" Sophie nodded. "But there is a catch. The bonding ritual requires a human and a Sylvari to link minds completely. No secrets, no barriers, total vulnerability, and if your minds are not compatible, it will kill you both." "How long does it take?" Jake asked. "Hours," Sophie said. "Maybe longer." Jake heard voices echoing down the tunnels. Soldiers from both sides converging on their location. He had minutes at best. "Then we need to buy time," he said. He turned to Nix. "Can you get a message out? Tell everyone what is really happening." Nix nodded. "I can broadcast from here. Both governments will try to shut me down, but I can get the truth out for a few minutes." "Do it," Jake said. He looked at Sophie. "Start the ritual." But Lyraina grabbed his arm. "Jake, this could kill us both. Are you certain?" Jake thought about his sister, about all the people who had died for a lie, about 3 days in the desert, carrying a woman he barely knew, because it was the right thing to do. "I am certain," he said. Lyraina smiled. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile. "I am honored to bond with you, Jake Morrison." Sophie led them to a circle carved into the floor. At the center were 2 platforms. She had them lie down side by side. Then she placed crystalline nodes on their temples. "This will hurt," she warned. "You will feel everything the other person has ever felt. You will know each other completely." Jake reached out and found Lyraina's hand. She squeezed back. "Do it," he said. Sophie activated the device. The last thing Jake heard before his mind exploded with sensation was the sound of soldiers breaching the chamber. Pain was the first thing Jake felt. Then it was not pain anymore. It was everything he was. Lyraina standing in a crystal palace, watching her mother die. The queen reached up with trembling hands and whispered, "Make peace, my daughter. End what I could not." Her last breath smelled like winter flowers. He was Lyraina as a child bonding with Vexarian for the first time, feeling the dragon's consciousness merge with hers, understanding that they would never truly be alone again. The joy was overwhelming. He was Lyraina, standing before her brother Theron, arguing about the war. She believed in peace. He believed in victory. When she turned away, he looked at her with eyes full of hate. Jake gasped and tried to pull back, but the connection held. Now Lyraina was in his mind. She was Jake at age 10 watching his sister Amy teach him how to ride a bike. She was laughing, her red hair flying in the wind. "Wait for me, Amy," he called. "I want to ride with you always," she promised. She was Jake holding Amy's hand in a hospital bed 3 years ago, her body broken from the Sylvari raid. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should have listened to you about enlisting." Jake told her it was not her fault, but she died anyway, and the last thing he felt was rage. She was Jake making the choice to save Lyraina, even though she was the enemy, even though his people would call him a traitor because Amy had died full of hate and Jake refused to die the same way. Their minds spiraled together, sharing memories, emotions, fears. Jake felt Lyraina's loneliness growing up, isolated as a queen. He felt her terror when her own guards turned on her, her desperation to reach the precursor site before she died. Lyraina felt Jake's grief over Amy. His anger at a war he did not understand, his stubborn determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. She felt his fear that he would fail her, that he would lose another person he cared about. Then something shifted. The precursor technology recognized them, recognized their bond. The chamber filled with light, and Jake felt power flow through him, through both of them. He was still himself, but he was also connected to Lyraina in a way that transcended words. He could feel her heartbeat as if it were his own, could sense her thoughts at the edge of his awareness. The platforms rose, lifting them to their feet. Jake opened his eyes and saw Lyraina looking back at him. Her eyes glowed with the same blue light he could see reflected in a nearby crystal. It worked. Sophie breathed. It actually worked. Jake turned and saw the chamber full of soldiers, human troops led by Commander Cross on one side, Sylvari warriors in elegant armor, led by someone who looked like Lyraina, but male Prince Theron on the other. Between them stood Sophie and Nyx, looking terrified. "Stand down," Morrison Cross ordered. "Lower your weapons." Lyraina stepped forward. "Brother," she said. "Why?" Theron sneered at her. "You were always weak, sister. Peace is surrender. Our people would rather die with honor than live as equals to these humans. The humans feel the same," Commander Cross said. "We will never share this galaxy with aliens." Jake felt rage building, but also felt Lyraina calming him through their bond. She was right. Violence would solve nothing here. He took a deep breath and spoke. "You are both wrong," he said. "The precursors created us to work together, not to dominate, not to submit, to cooperate." Theron laughed. "You expect me to believe precursor fairy tales. It is not a tale." Nyx interrupted. "I have broadcast the message to every world, both human and Sylvari. Billions are watching right now, seeing the truth." Cross paled. "You did what?" "The truth." Dr. Grant said. "The truth that your governments have been lying about. The truth that this war is built on greed and fear, not necessity. Show them." Lyraina whispered into Jake's mind through their bond. "Show them what we can do." Jake understood. He reached for the precursor technology with his thoughts and felt it respond. Lyraina did the same, their combined will amplifying each other. The chamber transformed. Holographic displays appeared showing star maps, showing worlds where precursor sites waited, showing the technology that neither species could access alone. "This is what you are fighting over," Jake said, "but you cannot have it, not without cooperation." Look. He manipulated the display, showing how human and Sylvari genetics were required to unlock each site, how neither species alone could activate the ancient machines. It was elegantly designed. The precursors had made it impossible for either side to win. Theron stared at the displays, then shook his head. "I will not accept this." He drew a weapon and pointed it at Lyraina. "If we cannot have the technology, then no one will." He tapped something on his wrist. A countdown appeared on everyone's displays. "Orbital bombardment incoming in 5 minutes. You are insane," Cross shouted. "You will kill us all." Theron smiled. Better death than compromise. Panic erupted. Soldiers from both sides started shouting. Some ran for the exits. Others trained weapons on each other. Jake felt fear through his bond with Lyraina, but also determination. "We can stop it," she said. "But we need to deepen the bond." Access. The full network Scifi overheard. It could kill you. The ritual was not complete. Your minds are linked but not fully merged. Then we merge. Jake said, "What choice do we have?" He looked at Lyriana and saw his own resolve reflected back. They sat, again on the platforms. Scifi adjusted the crystals, and the nodes blazed brighter. This time, Jake did not just feel Lyrina's memories. He became her. He understood what it meant to live for centuries, to carry the weight of a dying mother's wishes, to love a dragon as deeply as a sister. He felt her psychic senses awakening in him, allowing him to sense minds around them like candles in the dark. Lyraina became him. She understood human endurance, the way they pushed through impossible odds by sheer stubbornness. She felt his medical training, his instinct to heal rather than harm. She understood why he had carried her 90 miles and why he would do it again. They were not Jake and Lyraina anymore. They were both. They were something new. Power flooded through them. The precursor network responded to their unified consciousness. They saw the orbital weapons charging above, felt the trajectory calculations running through enemy targeting systems. With a thought, they accessed the precursor defense grid that had been dormant for millennia. The countdown reached 0. Nothing happened. Above the planet, invisible shields had activated, catching the bombardment and dispersing it harmlessly. Every soldier in the chamber stared at their displays in shock. How Theron whispered, "Because we chose differently." Jake and Lyraina said in unison. Their voices harmonized in an impossible way. They stood and approached Theron. The prince backed away, his confidence crumbling. "You are abominations," he said. "We are the future," they replied. "We are what the precursors hoped for, and you cannot stop us." Theron raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Vexarian appeared. The dragon had somehow found his way down into the ruins. His wounds were healing, now glowing with blue light from the precursor technology. He placed himself between Theron and his riders and growled. The sound shook dust from the ancient ceiling. "Stand down, Your Highness," one of Theron's own soldiers said. "We have seen enough. The lies end here." Other Sylvari warriors lowered their weapons. Theron looked around and saw his support crumbling. With a snarl, he activated a personal shield and ran. "Let him go," Commander Cross said quietly. She was staring at Jake and Lyraina with an expression of awe and fear. "What are you?" Jake felt Lyraina in his mind, helping him find words. "We are proof that your species can merge, that together you are stronger. We are the bridge." Cross lowered her weapon. "I cannot believe I am saying this, but I think I believe you." She looked at Scifi. "How long will their bond last? Forever." Scifi said, "Once merged at this depth, their minds cannot fully separate. They will always be connected." The soldiers around them began lowering weapons. One by one, human and Sylvari alike, they realized the war had just changed. The old rules no longer applied. Jake felt exhaustion creeping in. The effort of accessing the precursor network had drained him. Beside him, Lyraina swayed. He caught her and she leaned against him. "We need rest," she whispered into his mind. "Soon," he promised. "But first, we need to make sure this peace holds." Scifi stepped forward. "I have been recording everything. What happens next will determine if your sacrifice means anything." Jake looked at Commander Cross, then at the Sylvari warriors. "Will you accept a truce?" Cross hesitated, then nodded. "We need to contact Earth. Get authorization, do it," Jake said. "And we will contact the Sylvari Council." One of the Sylvari warriors approached and knelt before Lyraina. "Your Majesty, we believed you dead. The news of your survival will shake the Empire." "Good," Lyraina said. "Let it shake. We have shaken enough for one day." As soldiers from both sides began coordinating, Jake and Lyraina walked to a quiet corner of the chamber. Vexarian followed, curling protectively around them. The dragon purred a sound like distant thunder. "Did we just end the war?" Jake asked. Lyrina smiled through their bond, sharing a feeling of hope mixed with uncertainty. We began the ending. Whether it finishes depends on what happens next. What does happen next? She looked at him, and Jake saw through her eyes, saw himself exhausted, dirty, but alive. I must return to the Sylvari homeworld, claim my throne, make my case for peace, and you must come with me. Why? Because Lyrina said you saved my life. You bonded with me. You are now as much Sylvari as I am human. Our peoples need to see what we have become. Jake thought about Earth, about the court-martial he would face if he returned, but he also thought about Amy and the future she would never see. A future where maybe humans and Sylvari could stop killing each other. All right, he said, I will go. Then it is settled. Lyrina stood and helped him to his feet. In 6 months we will hold a coronation. Both our peoples will attend, and I will ask you a question in front of them all. What question? Lyrina smiled but did not answer. She just took his hand, and together they walked back toward the soldiers, toward Sophie and Nyx, toward a future that neither species had expected, but that both desperately needed. 6 months changed everything, and nothing. The war did not end cleanly. Wars never did. But the fighting stopped first in scattered sectors, then across entire systems. Footage of Jake carrying Lyrina through the desert had been recovered from his suit camera. Someone leaked it to the networks, and within days, every human and Sylvari had seen it. The image became iconic. A human soldier cradling an alien queen while her dragon crawled beside them. Both sides tried to spin it, their side claiming it showed human compassion, weakness, the other claiming Sylvari honor manipulation. But the people saw something simpler, 2 beings refusing to let each other die. Jake stood in his quarters aboard the diplomatic station Unity 7 and stared at his reflection. He wore formal clothes, a blend of human and Sylvari design that felt strange on his body. The past 6 months had been a blur of hearings, testimonies, broadcasts. He had become famous in a way he hated. People called him a hero, a traitor, a bridge, a fool, depending on who you asked. Through his bond, he felt Lyrina nearby. She was nervous. He smiled. Despite her regal bearing and centuries of life, she was afraid of what came next. As am I, he thought, and felt her acknowledgement ripple back. There was a knock on his door. Kate Brennan entered. She had been assigned as his bodyguard after the incident in the ruins. At first, she had been cold angry that he had abandoned his unit. But over time, she had softened. Now she was maybe his only real friend. You ready? She asked. No. Jake admitted. Kate grinned. Good. If you were ready, I would worry you had lost your mind. She checked her weapon and nodded toward the door. They are waiting. The coronation hall was vast enough to hold thousands. Representatives from Earth, the Sylvari homeworld, and 24 colony worlds filled the space. Cameras captured every angle, broadcasting to trillions. Jake walked down the center aisle, feeling every eye on him. Vexarian walked beside him. The dragon had fully healed, and his scales gleamed like diamonds. People gasped when they saw him. Many had never seen a Sylvari dragon up close. At the end of the aisle stood Lyrina. She wore a gown that seemed to be made of liquid starlight and a crown of crystal that floated above her head, held in place by some Sylvari technology Jake did not understand, but he barely noticed the regalia. He saw her smile, saw the warmth in her violet eyes, and felt her presence in his mind like coming home. You look beautiful, he thought. As do you, she replied with amusement. The ceremony was long. Speeches in multiple languages, blessings from both human and Sylvari religious leaders. Sophie Grant spoke about the precursors and what their message meant for both species. Nyx presented recovered archives, proving that both governments had known about the precursor plan and hidden it. The crowd murmured angry, confused, hopeful. Then it was Lyrina's turn to speak. She stepped forward, and her voice carried through the hall, amplified by both technology and her natural psychic abilities. "My people," she said, and Jake realized she meant both species. "I stand before you as your queen, but also as someone who has learned what it means to truly see the other. I was raised to view humans as lesser, aggressive, short-sighted, dangerous." Jake felt discomfort ripple through the human delegation, but then a human soldier saved my life. She looked at Jake. He carried me 90 miles through conditions that should have killed us both. He did this knowing his own people would call him a traitor. He did it because it was right. She paused, letting her words sink in. And in saving me, he showed me something I had never understood. Human endurance is not just physical, it is spiritual. Humans do not give up. They push through impossible odds by sheer will. And when I bonded with Jake Morrison, I gained that strength. I carry it with me now. The Sylvari delegation shifted. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slowly. In return, Lyrena continued. "Jake gained our gifts. He can sense emotions, touch minds, perceive the connections between all living things. We gave each other something precious, a glimpse of what we could be together." She gestured to a holographic display that lit up, showing star charts. "This is the precursor legacy. Hundreds of worlds with technology neither of us can access alone. My brother wanted to hoard it. Your military leaders wanted to seize it. Both were fools." The crowd murmured again, louder now. "The only way forward," Lyrena said, "is together, not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals, as partners. And to show my commitment to this path, I wish to ask Jake Morrison a question before all of you." She turned to him, and Jake felt his heart race. Through their bond, he sensed her certainty and also her fear that he might refuse Jake Morrison. She said, "Will you marry me?" The hall erupted. Some shouted approval. Others protested. Jake heard someone yell that this was a political stunt. Others called it beautiful. Kate behind him snorted with laughter. Jake stepped forward, and the noise died down. Everyone wanted to hear his answer. "Your Majesty," he said, and saw her wince at the formality. Lyrena. "We have been bonded for 6 months. I know your thoughts. I feel your presence every moment, through you. I have learned that the Sylvari are not monsters. You love deeply. You create beauty. You fear death and cherish life, just as we do." He took her hands. The crowd leaned forward. "But I also know that marriage between us is not just personal, it is symbolic. If I say yes, I become a prince of the Sylvari Empire. I become a living bridge between our peoples. Every extremist who wants this peace to fail will target us. Every zealot will see us as traitors." "I know," Lyrena said softly. Jake smiled. "So yes, I will marry you, not because it is easy, not because it will solve everything, but because I love you, and because maybe, just maybe, our union can show both our peoples what is possible." The hall exploded with noise. Some cheered, some booed. Cameras flashed like stars. Jake and Lyrena ignored them all. He pulled her close and kissed her. It was not the first time they had kissed in the past 6 months, but it was the first time they had done so publicly. When they finally pulled apart, Jake heard Vexarian roar. The sound was joyful, a crystalline note that rang through the hall. Other Sylvari in the crowd began to sing a traditional wedding song. Humans clapped uncertainly, at first, then with more confidence. Commander Cross stood from her seat in the human delegation. She looked old and tired, but her voice was firm. "Your Majesty, Mr. Morrison, on behalf of Earth, I give my blessing, and my promise that we will uphold the peace." A Sylvari elder rose from the other side. "I also give my blessing. Though many will oppose this, know that you have allies. Not everyone agreed." Jake saw Prince Theron in the prisoner section. His face twisted with rage, but he was surrounded by guards, both human and Sylvari. He could do nothing. The ceremony continued. Jake and Lyrena exchanged vows in both languages. They bound their hands with ribbons of silk and crystal, a blending of traditions. Vexarian placed his massive head between them and hummed, creating a sound that resonated in Jake's chest. When it was over, they walked back down the aisle together as the crowd threw flowers and small crystals. Jake felt overwhelmed by the noise, the attention, the weight of what they had just done. Almost there. Lyraina thought at him. Almost. He agreed. They reached the end of the hall and the doors opened to reveal a balcony overlooking the station. Beyond the windows, Jake saw ships from both species docked together. Scientists would begin joint research. Tomorrow, colonists would start settling shared worlds next month. The peace was fragile, but it was real. As they stood on the balcony waving to the crowds, a message flashed across every screen in the hall. Every precursor site across the galaxy had activated simultaneously. Ancient technology that had been dormant for millennia was coming online. Sophie Grant ran up to them, her face flushed. It is happening. The network is recognizing your bond. It is offering access to everything. Already? Lyraina asked. Sophie nodded. This is bigger than we thought. The precursors left more than technology. They left knowledge, medicine, science, culture, everything. Their civilization learned before they fell, and now you can access it. All of it. Jake felt dizzy. What do we do with it? Share it, Lyraina said immediately. Equally, both species. Some will try to steal it, Sophie warned. Some will say one side should control it. Then we stop them. Jake replied, we have access, they do not. If anyone wants this knowledge, they have to maintain the peace. It was not a perfect solution. Nothing about this was perfect, but it was a start. That evening, Jake and Lyraina stood alone in their quarters aboard the station. Vexarian slept nearby, curled around a heating crystal. Through the window, they watched ships from both species moving in coordinated patterns, no longer weapons fire but supply runs, medical transports, construction crews, building new stations. We did it, Lyraina said softly. We started it. Jake corrected. The real work begins now. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her. Through their bond, he felt her exhaustion, her hope, her love. He sent the same feelings back. Do you regret it? She asked, saying, yes. Jake thought about Amy, about the war, about everything he had lost and gained. Never, he said, you. Lyraina smiled and kissed him softly. Never far above them in orbit around Ashara Prime, a precursor probe activated. It had been waiting for this moment for thousands of years. Now it sent a signal out into deep space, a message that would take centuries to reach its destination. The message was simple. The children have passed the first test. Prepare for contact. But Jake and Lyraina knew nothing of this yet. They had their own challenges ahead. Political opposition, assassination attempts, the slow, difficult work of building peace between species that had been killing each other for a decade. For now, though they were together, they had Vexarian, they had allies, they had hope, and sometimes Jake thought as he held his alien wife and felt her presence warm in his mind. Sometimes hope is enough to start changing the galaxy. The war was over. The future had begun, and whatever came next, they would face it the way they had faced everything together.